BBC Sounds. Music, radio, podcasts.
Hello, I'm Andrew Petrie, and this is the Scottish Football Podcast, kickstarting your week with the final word on the weekend's action.
The shot saved by Sosa, but Kramaric will head home on the rebound, and Croatia have turned it round. They lead in Zagreb.
It's yet another loss for Scotland, making it one win in 15 games.
Performance good, really good. Thought we were brave with the ball. We tried to play, we tried to create chances, and on another night we'd have got what we deserved. Steve Clarke thinks they're on the right path, but where is it taking them? Away from the men's national team,
we've got Rangers, Celtic, Glasgow City, Hearts and even Hibs, all kind of in the mix. So yeah, I'm expecting exciting things.
We'll hear about a potentially pivotal couple of matches in the SWPL.
The Scottish Football Podcast from BBC Sport Scotland.
Well, I'm delighted to be joined by Tom English, BBC Scotland's chief sports writer, and John Walker, coach, analyst and host of the Scots Abroad podcast. Gentlemen, I'll ask you to sum up your weekend in a single word. John, you go first.
Flat.
Interesting. Tom?
Familiar.
Very, very interesting from you both. Right, as we record, it's the evening of Sunday, the 13th of October, but you'll be hearing this on Monday morning at the earliest. There's lots to discuss, and the focus has been mainly on Scotland. But from each of you, out with the men's national team, is there something else that's caught your eye in the Scottish football world this weekend? John, I'll start with you.
Yes, so the Scottish League Challenge Cup. I was involved in East Kilbride last year, and I'm very complimentary of Mick Kennedy and Cy Ferry, and was probably too complimentary ahead of the Airdrie East Kilbride League Cup group game, mentioning that I thought it was going to be a really good game, a really close tie, and Airdrie were 6-0 up at half-time and won that game 8-0, so to everyone's delight and ridicule, I took that on the chin quite a bit over Twitter, but they drew one each yesterday in the Challenge Cup, and East Kilbride won in penalties. So East Kilbride knocking out the holders of the League Challenge Cup Airdrie is probably worth a mention.
It's good to see that you've held on to that there. That's fantastic. Tom, what about yourself?
That was my one as well. Because that was a notable victory for East Kilbride. You couldn't miss that. I guess Partick and Falkirk was interesting as well. Partick needs something to kickstart their season. They got a point. Falkirk wobbling a little bit. Their form recently hasn't been great. That championship is endlessly fascinating, isn't it? It's a real battle.
Certainly is. Good choices both. Before we move on, let's have a look at the latest headlines. Having lost 2-1 to Croatia on Saturday, Scotland head coach Steve Clarke says his side have to keep believing as they prepare to face Portugal in the Nations League at Hampden on Tuesday. Ominously for Scotland, Cristiano Ronaldo scored his 133rd goal for the Portuguese as they won 3-1 in Poland to make it 3 wins out of 3 in the competition and remain top of Group A. In the Championship, as Tom alluded to, leaders Falkirk were held to a 1-1 draw away at Partick Thistle on Saturday. And as John alluded to, Lowland League side East Kilbride pulled off the shock of the Challenge Cup fourth round by beating Championship outfit Airdrie on penalties. And in the SWPL, champions Celtic have fallen to 5th after losing 1-0 away at third-placed Hearts. Rangers remain top after drawing 1-1 with second-place Glasgow City at Ibrox on Saturday. Right, we can't waste any more time. We've got to talk about Scotland's 2-1 loss to Croatia in Zagreb. Tom, I'll start with yourself. What did you make of the result, and what did you make, crucially, of the performance?
I thought the performance was good, Andrew. I think the 3 performances in the group so far have been good, but with the sucker punch at the end. First 2 obviously late goals and a late loss, and yet again, Scotland involved in late drama. The goal that wasn't, and probably was offside, but for just a split second there, you thought that they were going to have this fantastic draw away from home. I think, like, the way I look at Steve Clarke and the way I look at the Scotland team at the moment, like, they're depleted, right? They're missing a full team. They're probably missing somewhere between 4 and 6 starting players, right? So that is a savage blow to them. But they're competitive against really good sides. The grief that Clarke is getting, and the pressure that he is feeling, and it's inescapable, is because of Hungary. It's because of losing to Hungary. It's not because he's lost the last 3 games. It's because he lost to Hungary and the way they lost. Never fired a shot, ultra defensive, in front of 1 million of the Tartan army in Germany. It was an abomination of a performance. That's the problem. It's not these 3 games, because these 3 games have been, okay, no points, but decent, encouraging performances.
John, would you agree with that? Do you think Scotland deserved, maybe at least a point from the game against Croatia?
Yeah, I wouldn't have been too concerned about that. Croatia are a side that I've watched loads of, though, and I do feel Croatia are a side you're always in a game with. They tend not to blow teams away 4, 5 and 6. So I think they are a team similar to Poland that I felt were probably closer to and should probably be getting points off them. I do think if you probably flip that and you get the late goal against Croatia that holds on, you keep the draw against Poland, it's probably not that negative an outlook as we may say.
And Tom, you touched on the performance there. What were the actual positives that Steve Clarke had to take away from Zagreb?
Well, they had to be defensively sound, and I think for a large part they were. I was worried about Grant Hanley because he hasn't played much club football at all. I thought he was solid. I thought Suter was good. I thought they were competitive. They were in the game right to the end. That's all you can hope for. Like, Croatia are a better side, but Scotland, they were right in the game right to the end. Missing loads of players. They could have felt sorry for themselves because they were missing a lot of stellar names, but they didn't. They dug in. They were well organised. They had a go. They showed a bit of ambition in their play. They just weren't good enough in the end. I don't think too many people would be surprised by that, but I'm certainly encouraged by the performance. There's a lot of people saying, Steve Clarke needs to go, to move on, turn the page, yesterday's man, and all of that. I couldn't come up with a single person who would, in these last 3 games, deliver better performances than the ones that he has produced, given the talent that he's been missing. It goes, I know I'm repeating myself, but I think it's worth repeating. His problems begin and end in that Hungary performance. Everything since has been okay.
And John, from an analyst's point of view, where specifically did it go wrong for Scotland? How did they find themselves behind?
I still think there's a problem with us. I hate to go on unless everyone moans when I mention this, but stylistically, I think there's a real problem. And I think it's highlighted, as Tom said, when you lose 4 or 5 key players, because our style is reliant on individuals. It's not a style of play that people can slot into. It's Kieran Tierney making the back 5, and it changes the whole system. It's Aaron Hickey at right wing back, given us that option, because as much as Tony Ralston, I don't think did too much to let us down, he's just not anywhere near what Aaron Hickey brings to the side. John McGinn, we all know, although he's maybe been out of form a little bit for Scotland, John McGinn changes the whole team in that perspective. For me, a lot of the problems come from not playing natural wide men. I know Ben Doak started, which is a good starting point, but Ryan Christie's not a natural wide man, and I put up a clip on Twitter of us continually conceding these same goals with overlapping right wing backs from that left side. So when you've got Kenny McLean, Callum McGregor, Ryan Christie, the people that have to go out and mark those areas are not doing that on a week-to-week basis, and you're chucking them round pegs and square holes. You're doing this time and time again. It's alarming how many of the same goals I keep seeing conceded, and our ability to try and defend the box is really questionable. I felt like the Portugal game was noted, the late goal crosses. I think we'll see loads of that about to come. Croatia, again, there was a warning sign right before we conceded that second goal from the exact same move, switching a play to the right wing back, overlapping. Happened in the Norway game, it happened in the Georgia game. It's a continual thing, and it's because he's so happy to give up the wide areas in his 5-3-2 because he knows he has to. But when it's 4-3-3, put wide men in the areas, have them defending fullbacks, and just do these natural things. I think that's what I keep seeing happening.
You mentioned Ben Doak there, John. Tom, how impressed were you with the 18-year-old on his very first start for Scotland?
I thought he contributed well. He's a boy with a lot of confidence and a lot of ability, a lot of pace. Very encouraged and excited by him. I think some of the analysis has been way over the top. I think we need to judge Ben Doak on the player that he is, not the player that we're desperate for him to become. Let's be fair on this kid, He's a teenager. So let's not try and pretend that he is the second coming, He is a very promising player. That's all he is. And I think some of the analysis that I've heard and read, it doesn't ring true with what I saw from Doak. I think we need to be honest about this, just because we're desperate for Ben Doak to become the game changer in this Scotland team doesn't mean he is right now. We want him to be, and we need to be fair to him. He was good. I'm very encouraged, but let's keep the feet on the ground and let's be fair to him.
So do you think, Tom, then it's still maybe a little bit too early to expect him to play regular games from the start for Scotland? Do you expect him to maybe be more of an impact player later on?
I do, yeah. I do. But I think he will be an impact player, and I think you would always want him on that bench to come on and change games. But if McGinn comes back into the team, McGinn plays. There's a lot of Lewis Ferguson thank God he's back in training now. So he's on the road to recovery. There's plenty of other players, senior players, that will be in this team ahead of Doak. But he's a fantastic option to have. I think if you just say Ben Doak is a starter now, I don't think you're playing fair with him. You're piling all this pressure on him. I mean, I'm waiting. The comparisons with some of the Scotland greats. I think it's coming. I can sense it. I can sense it in the air. Someone is going to say something stupid and compare him to a Scottish immortal, and that's not going to help anybody.
And John, again, going back to the analysis, you were saying there that stylistically Scotland have a problem. Have they tried, or have you seen any evidence that Steve Clarke has tried to change that since the Euros? Obviously, he has changed formation, but that's maybe been, his hands maybe been a little bit forced because of the injuries.
I would agree with that. Yeah, if Grant Hanley's having to start at centre-half in a back four, if you're already reducing the amount of centre-halves you have playing on the pitch, and Grant Hanley's one of the people keeping his place, it means your hands are kind of tied behind your back. Stylistically, there was something he said in the Portugal game that I just don't agree with, and I don't know if I'm maybe naive, but I'm looking at McTominay playing for the team in the top of Serie A just now. I'm looking at Billy Gilmour, who's got quality to play for that side as well. John McGinn, I know, is out just now. But you look at those three players, they play with possession-based teams at the highest level in European football, in the highest leagues in European football. And Steve Clarke said, when we find ourselves on the ball, that's when we need to show composure. We are creating players that I believe we need to find a way to get them on the ball, not for them to find the ball, dropping off second balls, winning the ball off of people and counter-attacking. We need to start finding a way. I see John Souttar week in, week out. John Souttar's passing ability is really strong, but I don't see him do that enough for Scotland. There was one pass he played into Ben Doak that broke 7 players on the Croatian press. We have that quality there. We have players that can do that. I think we need to start imposing that and saying to people like Billy Gilmour, see, instead of you getting the ball when you're able to get the ball, let's start building around you and focusing on keeping the ball. I think when you've got Grant Hanley, maybe you're a bit hindered by what you can do there. Tony Ralston is a bit restricted in what he can and can't do, although he plays with the best football inside in Scotland. So I always find it alarming how he looks really uncomfortable on a ball for Scotland, because he literally was in Postecoglou's side before Johnston was signed, and he looked like a really good footballer in that side. So I think it's little bits of that. I don't feel we're addressing that. I think Croatia was the same. I think when the ball dropped to Billy Gilmour and McTominay, we've seen them keep the ball. We've seen us start to control games. And when that happened, you've seen Croatia drop. And we had periods of 5-6 minutes where I was looking at us and going, we look really good just now, actually, on the ball. This is really tidy. It would just be nice to see us start building from that, from the word go, and actually start really controlling teams the same way that every team around us at the same level, whether it's Norway, Georgia, Croatia, Poland, seems to start doing against us.
And it's interesting you mentioned John Souttar there, because it feels like he's been in the Scotland team for such a long time, yet that was only his 10th cap last night. You mentioned Grant Hanley again, and perhaps the limitations that he has in his play. Is Souttar maybe the answer to one of those kind of square pegs at the back? Is he the man to come into the team and maybe shore up the defence?
I think John Souttar is a cracking footballer. I've never understood the underrated nature towards John Souttar. It's always seen the same thing with Rangers fans. He's got a mistake in him. Yeah, he's playing for Rangers for a reason. He's playing at this level and he's stuck at this level for a reason. But John Souttar's played for a struggling Hearts. He's playing for a good Rangers. He played for an up-and-coming Dundee United. He's kind of touched loads of different facets as what you would want. In games that we might dominate, John Souttar's comfortable. In games you need to defend your box, John Souttar's comfortable. He's got loads of different bits to his game that I feel is built on that not every Scottish player necessarily gets.
Would you agree with that, Tom?
Yeah, I would. Absolutely, I would. I think if John Souttar hadn't had the injury-ravaged career that he's had, he'd be playing at a very good level in the English Premier League. I think he's got all the attributes. What he hasn't had is luck. And the one thing I'd wish for is that he gets a run of years without an injury, because he's had 2-3 maybe serious injuries that have cost him maybe 2 or 3 years of his career, and that progress keeps getting checked. If he had stayed injury free, I'd be certain he'd be down in the English Premier League playing for a good club.
And maybe we can expect to see him against Portugal. It was a pretty solid performance individually from Suter against Croatia. Tom, is there any other changes you would make to the team? Obviously, you've already talked about Ben Doak, but is there anyone else you'd want to come in?
I think Shea Adams, he didn't start the game because he was a bit unwell during the week. If he's fine, I'd definitely start with Shea Adams. He's flying with Torino, 3 goals in 4 games for them. And he's a guy, and you can see he made a difference when he came on as well. He's a guy full of confidence at the moment. Lyndon Dykes, he's been a great servant for Scotland, but I want somebody with a bit more about them. And I think Adams is more likely to score you a goal. Dykes is struggling with his club. Adams is playing in Serie A and playing very well he scored against Lazio last week before. Lazio are a class team. He's scoring against really, really good sides. So I definitely have Adams if he's fit. Apart from that, there's really not a lot else, is there? I mean, with all these players missing, there's not a lot else. I'd probably keep the rest of it the same.
And John, I think I know who you're going to say if I ask you this question. I'm not going to say whether I agree or disagree, though. I'll let you try and sway my mind on that. But do you think Ryan Gold should be in Steve Clarke's starting 11 against Portugal?
I really do. I think in the 10 minutes we've seen, I think the pass for Che Adams, and I think these are the little things that sometimes go overlooked. What Tom said is bang on for me. Lyndon Dykes, massive servant. At a time that he came into Scotland, we were dying. But when I look at Shea Adams' movement and Ryan Gold's pass, that's the kind of players I'm looking to in these teams to unpick locks when you get the chance, who can deliver. Ryan Gold plays for a lower level Vancouver side. They're not quite the elite in the MLS, but he's reliant on to pull stuff out of nothing, and he continually does it. I know the level's there, but he's playing with that level, playing against that level. When that chance comes, I look at Ryan Gold, the amount of players I see in that Scotland side that would have bounced that pass back or would have tried to turn on that ball. Shea Adams has got intelligence and movement. See as many players like Ryan Christie, Shea Adams, Ryan Gold, Scott McTominay, Billy Gilmore, who I think are on a quote-unquote higher level than some of the others in the squad. Those are the ones that I would want on the pitch to influence stuff when we do have the ball.
Would you have Gold instead of Doak, John?
I would have Gold instead of Kenny McLean.
Would you? Okay. Well, that would be very, very attacking then.
Really I think we should go for it.
It's reckless abandon.
Well, I suppose that's it, because how does Steve Clarke approach these games? He's kind of talked more about looking at the qualification campaign. Should he really be experimenting in the next couple of games? Because, they've already lost 3.
I think that's a key point. Like, they're not going to do anything in this group, right? So this group is now, always was, but is definitely now a learning process, right? So I think that backs up John's point. Bring Gold in, no matter who it's for. I mean, Kenny McLean, great shout, because you need to learn more about these guys. This has got a journey of discovery now, this group. So learn more about Gold, learn more about Lewis Morgan, learn more about these players, and do they have anything to offer instead of playing the same old. I suspect that Doak might come out of the team, because to ask him to start 2 games in a row at his age is difficult. I think Gold has a great chance of coming in, and I'd like to see a bit more of that. He doesn't have too many players at his disposal, but we'd like to see more from Gold. I'd like to see more from Lewis Morgan, just to see if they've got something to offer. I think the Gold unquestionably does.
What about Nicky Devlin? We've talked about Anthony Ralston and again perhaps his limitations. Is it time to give Devlin a go?
Yeah, for me, this is I can't not say this. I think there's not much an ability to choose between Nicky Devlin and Tony Ralston, but I can't have the argument constantly that Grant Hanley shouldn't be starting because he's not playing for his club, when I've got Nicky Devlin, who started every game for a high-flying Aberdeen, who are joint top, and Ralston's Celtic's backup right back. It just makes so much sense to me, with all the kind of vitriol there seems to be towards Tony Ralston as well, that Nicky Devlin seems like your kind of good luck story, good news story, that I think he's got the same quality, same ability. He's playing for now an Aberdeen side that are a possession-based side, so again, he ticks that box for me. That is a different facet. He's getting goals and assists for Aberdeen. I would definitely have Nicky Devlin in that starting 11.
I think we should have a look at him for sure. I'm gonna stick up for Anthony Ralston here, because he's not an international class fullback. He's just not, right? He wouldn't be in this squad anywhere near it if it wasn't for Aaron Hickey and Nathan Patterson both being out. he's been asked to do a job. And look at the games that he has played. Germany, Switzerland, a must-win against Hungary with the pressure on them, and the last 3 against top-class opposition. You're asking him to repeatedly to punch above his weight, while all this negativity has been crowding in around him, and he's not playing much for Celtic as well. I mean, it's amazing he's able to put one foot in front of the other. It's got a lot of mental strength, this guy. He's not the greatest footballer in the world, but I do admire what he's trying to do. He's got a lot of dog in him, and fair play to him for that, for kind of doing his absolute damnedest against a wave of negativity in his direction. Definitely like to see more. I'd like to see more of that. And Clark is not going to throw caution to the wind as much as we'd like him to. But those guys who've turned up and are in the squad, let's see a bit more of them, What's he going to learn? He's not going to learn anything about them if it keeps him on the bench. Give him 15, 20 minutes, 25 minutes.
Absolutely. It's going to be really interesting to see what Steve Clarke does on Tuesday night against Portugal at Hampden. John and Tom, thank you very much.
You're listening to the Scottish Football Podcast from BBC Sport Scotland.
Well, it was also a big weekend in the SWPL with the top 2 Rangers and Glasgow City facing each other at Ibrox on Saturday, while the teams in 3rd and 4th, Hearts and Celtic, played on Sunday. To fill us in on what happened, we are joined now by SWPL guru and some say Andrew Petrie lookalike, Charlotte Cohen. Charlotte, always a delight to talk to you. A massive
Pleasure.
weekend at the top of the SWPL, but we'll start with Rangers against City. Were you expecting a draw, and do you think it was a fair result in the end?
Was I expecting a draw? Before the game, I don't think so. I mean, I know Rangers had kind of had a bit of a sticky couple of results. They drew with Celtic and then they had kind of narrow win over Motherwell the weekend before. But, I mean, before the game, I would have probably thought Rangers would have come out on top, just given the kind of how free scoring they've been so far this season. The likes of Katie Wilkinson, who's just can't stop scoring goals. But I think on the balance of play, City had the much better first half, Rangers had the much better second half. I think, the old cliche of game of two halves, I think a draw is probably a fair result.
And how happy would Joe Potter, the Rangers head coach, and Leanne Ross, the City head coach, be with that? And how happy will they be with the starts to the season they've made? Obviously, Rangers a point ahead of City at the top of the table at the minute.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because after the game, in Joe Potter's post-match, she was talking about how, disappointed not to win the game, but equally happy with a point. And she was talking about how competitive she thinks it's going to be this season, given how well, the other teams in the kind of top 4 or 5 are doing. So I think she'll be pleased with the point. I think Leanne Ross would probably be the happier of the two. I think especially their first half performance was very, very impressive. And I think they both had really good starts to the season. Obviously, Rangers only, I think, a point ahead of City in the table. But City, going into that one yesterday, City had the best defensive record, Rangers the best attacking record. So it's been a good start. I think there's still, obviously, so much time left in the season. But I think they'll both be happy with how their sides have performed so far this season.
And the big one today, obviously, Celtic travelling to the Oriam and losing 1-0 to Hearts. Hearts are now on 24 points, just 1 behind Glasgow City and 2 behind Rangers. A historic result, of course. Is that Hearts now definitively in the title race?
I think Hearts have been in the title race kind of since the start of the season. They had such a good summer window, bringing in the likes of Bailey Hutchison, Ailey Shore. So I don't think this is the start of them being part of the title race. I think it's, their summer business was the markings of a club who want to challenge at the top end of the table. And we saw them with that draw against Celtic last December, which I think was the first time they'd taken points off a top 3 side. So, and Eva Olid at the helm, she knows what she's doing. So yeah, they're definitely in the title race, but I think they've been in the title race since day one. And I'm hoping this season is going to be a bit more exciting in terms of, I know we went down to the wire last season and that last day was so exciting, but, we've got Rangers, Celtic, Glasgow City, Hearts, and even Hibs, all kind of in the mix. So yeah, I'm expecting exciting things.
Well, like you said, the league has gone to the wire, gone down to the final day, almost to the final kick of the ball in the last couple of seasons. So how big a blow is this? I know it's early on, but how much will Celtic struggle to maybe come back from this, because they're already lagging behind in terms of points?
Yeah, well, they've got a game in hand, but I mean, even if they win that game in hand, they're still behind Hearts. So they're still, I think, a point behind Hearts, even if they win. So it's tough. You never want to be, losing games, drawing games this early on. You want to be picking up as many points as possible. And my one worry for Celtic is they've got these massive Champions League games looming. They've got Real Madrid, Chelsea. These are huge games. They're playing at Stamford Bridge, just playing at Parkhead. So these will be on Elena Sidiku's mind when she's picking her teams, for example. I mean, I noticed she made a fair few changes to the team today. So I don't know. You can't write them off, obviously. We're, 9-10 games in? So there's no way they can be written off. But I think it's not the greatest start, and probably not the start they will have wanted, given how well things went last season. But early days, still plenty of time for other people to drop points, them to pick up points. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, certainly very early on, but I get the feeling this one will be tight going right down the home stretch as well. Charlotte Cohen, thank you very much for joining us.
Pleasure.
Time to wrap things up, but many thanks to Tom English, John Walker and Charlotte Cohen, and thank you for listening. Remember, we'll be here with new episodes of the Scottish Football Podcast bright and early every weekday morning. So to make sure you don't miss out, just hit subscribe on BBC Sounds or wherever you listen. Until next time, have a good one. And if you're going to Hampden on Tuesday night, I'll see you there. Goodbye.
Just a quick reminder, the Behind the Goals podcast is available every Tuesday with me, Rachel Corsey, and me, Leanne Crichton. It's your one-stop shop for our take on everything that's happening in the world of football. Just head to BBC Sounds or wherever you get your podcasts and search for Behind the Goals.